Let's get a little dramatic. Hey everybody, Espira. Japan has been extremely proactive as it comes to getting locals running to be able to play Fusion World, which has been great. I love that we're getting metadata early to kind of give ourselves a sense of what people are playing, what people are interested in, where people are gravitating with things. And this is kind of where I really want to focus in on the bigger picture of what's seeing play. I'm not going to focus too much on specific deck lists. I think both Eggman and Cosmic did that better, so links to their videos down in the description. But I do think having an overall conversation about what people are playing, especially as we lead into celebration events and people want to know what they should be playing for those, as well as their own locals, I think there's a lot of context to be able to try and understand how we should be shifting our techs and the way we build the decks. Before that though, I do want to talk about the dialogue going around the release of this game and the meta, just because I'm not totally a fan of kind of how it's going out. Japan is getting to play this game globally at the same time as we are, essentially establishing a baseline. No longer do we need to look to Japan towards how things are played like we do in One Piece or Digimon, but if anything, it's just kind of a conversation piece. As Japan develops and works on their own meta, which I think you need to recognize that every region plays the game differently, regardless of being in the same card pool, so there will be differences in meta regardless. But now because we're on the same card pool with the same release dates, it is a conversation between regions in regards to what is seeing play and how we should be able to build appropriately. That said, I don't really love the conversation when we start looking at it from the lens of, oh, the Japan meta hasn't evolved past X, or the notion that one region is better than another or anything like that. I don't really love these conversations. I'll remind everybody that North America was supposed to be the best region last year and they all got knocked out of top 8 at Worlds. Just to say, I think while yes, I think there's an inherent advantage at having played Masters and having the West having that experience from how the games play out there are some notable differences about the way the Fusion World plays out that I think benefits the fact that anyone can kind of pick it up and probably do well. And this is a dialogue that comes time and time again when it comes to any card game. When One Piece launched, you had Hearthstone players and Vanguard players and Pokemon players and Yu-Gi-Oh players and players from all around coming into the game, all kinds of walks of the TCG landscape, and to that number, a lot of them have had success regardless of where they come from. I do agree that you need to look at lists with a grain of salt. Understand that yes, 100% lists for the next couple of weeks are going to very often be scrapped together with what people were able to get their hands on. And again, the caveat that these are essentially locals, so take that with its own grain of salt when it comes to player skill and everything like that. But I would just love the conversation to stray into more territories about understanding why people playing are playing what they are, as opposed to being like, oh, we need to disregard the metas in other regions because, hello, we should be doing the same with our region just because they're all playing the game wrong. I think there is a learning curve, but for what it's worth, especially with Fusion World, that learning curve is going to exist everywhere because it's not like Masters had the greatest player base for the past 4 years, which got us into the situation of needing Fusion World in the first place. That's just kind of the 2 cents I want to have in the conversation. I am excited to have a game where Japan is involved in the global circuit in a way where we can discover the meta together and we can compete. I am so excited that I can post up to a national event or maybe Worlds or something of the sort and get the chance to compete against Japanese players. I love to banter about the fact that some regions are better than others because I just love the excitement of competition, but never in a sense to kind of diminish their accomplishments or the way that they play, but more so just as a friendly competition. And I think any data we can get our hands on to becoming better globally is super important. That's the lens that I'm going to take data with in all regions, regardless of where it comes from, when it comes to understanding how we should be evolving the game forward. Mini rant aside, let's look into it. In terms of the pie chart that I'm working with here, I've scraped together results from 64 different locals from the past 5 days across JP Twitter. I do want to note there may be a couple of duplicates. It is really hard to pull that data together just based off of social media posts of a language you don't understand. But effectively, the way I did it were people or tournament organizers were self-reporting that they had X deck win, or people who made it to the finals but ended up losing. I would take who their finals opponent was because naturally they're the ones who actually won the tournament and threw them into this chart. And that's how I came to these numbers. I'll also actually have the link to the Excel sheet that I was using so you guys can reference any specific posts if you want to take a deeper look to any specific leader. Off the bat, general trends, green is incredibly popular, which I think we were all predicting for quite a while, with Gohan having 15 winning lists and Broly having 12, representing some close to like 45% of the pie, which, to be honest, not surprised. If anything, the biggest thing I'm surprised about is how underperforming androids are doing but it may just be that a lot of players are playing the Gohan and Broly instead. Continuing down the pie, we have Beerus, which is very welcome to see in the 7th slot. And it's not that I think Beerus is necessarily extremely strong into green, but just that its removal is so strong that it can apply pressure against a multitude of different decks and do well. Ballpark, same thing as Goku Black, especially when you just play an aggressive package. I think the biggest conversation, though, when we take a breakdown of what we can pull from these 64 locals, is that there's a current battle between the two pillars of the format at the moment, which are green, which we're seeing, but also yellow. Because as we continue into the chart, we can actually see Cooler 6 winning decks, Frieza 6 winning decks, Ginyu 3 winning decks. And actually the video below by Cosmic actually breaks down a Ginyu list that won a 57-man tournament. Looking at these results, it's very clear that this is kind of where the meta is stabilizing as a whole. Of course, it's very early and things are going to shift, but just kind of where things start off on day 0. People want to play the green decks because it has the strongest top end and the strongest inevitability in the game. Whereas yellow instead is shifting into combating that by being too fast. And I will say that the yellow matchup for Gohan is incredibly tough, but the beauty there being that if you're seeing a bunch of yellow aggro, you can pivot over to Broly and have an easier time there. Yellow is extremely fast at dumping out 20Ks, especially if you play the slim package of Recoome and Ginyu. You don't need to, but it adds in a bunch of free aggro to get there early. And then the reason as to why we're probably seeing Frieza and Cooler in high representations in Ginyu is because they have the benefit of having more consistent ways to beat over Go Big decks like Broly, utilizing things like Cooler, like the 4-drop Frieza, and being able to get their restands. Cooler having the benefit of being able to attack twice, Frieza having the benefit of being the stronger mid-range deck. And when we look at pulling away from specific leaders and looking at general trends of the meta, we can see that both green and yellow are taking up some ballpark 2/3 portions of the entire meta, which is huge, but makes a lot of sense when you consider how centralizing green is. So where does the meta go from here? Well, I think the biggest thing is that if yellow keeps trending upwards the way it is, these Gohan decks are probably going to have to pivot into Broly decks to be able to deal with the early game a little bit better. The 25k base in the face of a 20k barrage is extremely useful, and the additional ramp from the leader means you get into your top end a turn earlier, which does make a huge difference. Of course, these shifts into Broly do open up opportunities for decks like Goku Black and Vegeta, which swing very favorably into Broly, to have an opening there. And between that ruckus, I think red sits very comfortably in the middle to have matchups against most anything. I think it's stronger going into things like yellow, but it can still play against green, especially when you consider that red has a lot of options to be able to punish misplays when it comes to board control, when it comes to the SCR being able to burn a battle card or things like that. My final analysis here is the crit leaders are all overperforming, which I think is fantastic. I was very apprehensive of how well the crit leaders would do because of my bias with the way Masters played out. But I do love to see that across Cooler, Goku Black, and Beerus, they are the most represented decks after looking at Gohan and Broly. I understand these are just locals results. I understand these are week 0 results. The game hasn't released yet. Reminder to everybody. But I do love to see this trend, the fact that they're still doing all right, they're still performing, which opens up so much of how we can think about the meta and explore the meta. So as a summary, green's really strong. Shocker, nobody is surprised. In combating that fact, yellow is pushing forth as a strong, arguably the strongest aggro deck, with the ones that are able to push a little bit of top end in Frieza and Cooler doing the best. And then you have a smattering of red and blue, kind of living in that middle space, finding edges when they're either better against the yellow decks or the green decks. What does that mean moving forward? Well, Japan has the benefit that they actually have more premier tournaments than North America. In set 1, we might get one regional depending on what Bandai decides to rule for the Carta Magica regional. But in Japan, they have EX battles, which are like treasure cups for One Piece, which are premier non-organized play related events that don't feed into like championships or anything like that, but they're still large events. And that's happening this weekend. And I think this is where we're really going to get our first taste of where people take this first piece of metadata and shift it over to a big tournament. Like it or not, I think because Japan is going to have so many more opportunities in set 1 to be able to play in premier tournaments, there's just going to be a lot more data there to define kind of what the meta looks like. But of course, on our side, we still have the digital client that's releasing at the end of the month, and we're going to be able to pull a lot from that as well. All in all, I'm so excited to see kind of how things play out, especially with the back and forth that we've got going on with the way that the colors are playing out. And that's the thing that I want to pull from this. In regards to deck builds, Sure, take it with a grain of salt the way people have performed with these winning deck lists, but I want to say that you should do that with every deck list. If you think you're going to win a tournament because you just copied someone else's deck list and ran it, no, you still need the reps, you still need to understand why the choices are there, and you still kind of need to make your own decisions to accommodate for where the meta is shifting. People will make changes in according to tournament results, and you need to shift with those changes. Nevertheless, I am jazzed and so excited to hear more about what's happening in Japan, but also to get things kickstarted here. People are playing in celebration events, people will be going to locals tournaments, and we're going to be able to pull so much data from the client that I'm just really excited to see how things shake out and just get my hand on more games. However, if you are looking for deck lists, maybe for your celebration events or your locals, we got them in the channel. I do like to think that my builds are able to get you the distance, so jump on that. And with that, I'll catch you guys on the next one.